Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to Stocks to Buy, episode, damn it, 33. We've been pumping these out for quite some time now. Every Sunday seems to be the way to go because that's when everybody's just kind of getting geared up for the market startup. Last week was a bit staggering, but I've been really fixating my focus down into this one AI stock. There's a reason that I don't buy a whole lot of stocks at once, right? Like sometimes just value presents itself, and I just can't get over how bad markets are just absolutely eviscerating this stock right now. When I mean eviscerating, I'm not talking about crashing by any metric. But I mean, when you become an investor, you kind of got to pay attention to the news and the earnings of the companies. And the best opportunities kind of arise when there's a clear disconnect between the public opinion and reality of these companies' operations. And today I want to talk about those operations, try those operations out, like Gemini, the AI tool that's competing with ChatGPT and many of the others that has just been getting crapped on religiously. We'll talk about how it's being crapped on by the public today. And obviously some of it is well deserved, but we're going to do some comparables. We're going to talk about Waymo, self-driving that is now expanding beyond San Francisco into many other cities. And honestly, I think it's probably one of the most under-discussed aspects of the self-driving industry today, being the leader next to Tesla, but Tesla's not in the same realm, I think, as Google is even today. And we're going to break all of this down because many of you know I have been buying Google stock. I've actually only really been buying two stocks. And again, I always kind of joke about this in contrast to what my current fiance has in her portfolio, but I'm really thinking that Google and Tesla are going to be kind of the primary two sources of growth for the first half of this year. I really want to scale these two positions up for whatever reasons. I can argue about Tesla. I always lose subscribers when I talk about Tesla, but today is going to be specifically Google, which is now at about 5.7% of my portfolio. In the scope of my fiance and I's portfolio, we got a ways to go with these still, but I wouldn't mind seeing that Google being about a 20 or 30K position on the Canadian conversion side. Right now I've got about 68 shares, converted to CAD. It's only really worth about 13 grand. It's not really that materially impacting. It'd be nice to get it to a scale where if it doubles or triples up over the next 10 years, at least I'm getting a decent, chunk of return. And there's risk with that, but in the scope of our portfolios, and as I continue to buy the S&P 500, again, I don't think this is going to be, over a long period of time, that worse of an investment. But I just want to talk about this year in comparable, because obviously I'm not showing Nvidia on this chart because Nvidia's gone to the friggin' moon and back. But I mean, it's up like 60% this year. But in comparable to the other magnificent large cap stocks out there, Tesla's been one of the hardest, hit down 22%. Alphabet's only up 4%. Meta's up damn near 40%. Microsoft's up 10%. And Apple's been starting to lackluster to the downside. But the difference in contrast to all these other companies is Google's trading at like a 26 times multiple right now. Apple's just touching around 30. I think Microsoft's at a 36 or 37. We'll kind of do the comparable with Microsoft once we start talking about the valuations. Even Meta is, it's getting sky high like valuations as well here. So Google's just playing in this realm that we'll loop back around on and talk about the valuations. But I just want to talk about the news, and then we're going to try Gemini real quick because Google, their Gemini demo that was showing some of the other advancements of the technology were considered to be faked because they were speeding up some of the footage. They were manipulating some things, which we constantly see in these videos. I mean, Tesla's speeding up the robot video. They just didn't really publicize it. So when they were called out on a lot of this stuff, it was just kind of a mixed reaction to it. This was the first big, downfall for them trying to get involved in the AI space. But today it's getting a little bit worse because of the inclusion. I honestly think this is like one of the stupidest things I've ever seen, and really shows a light of the team and kind of the thoughts going behind how they want AI to be perceived. Because clearly, there's some, people making really specific decisions on how these search results are, generating, what we're seeing. But just take a listen. I mean, you've probably seen this.
Google has had to temporarily halt its latest AI model. Now, this is something called Gemini, a program that Google released, and it would allow you to write in a prompt that would then generate images. For example, if you typed in, "show me a picture of a medieval king of England," this is what you'd get. Medieval king of England. One of those, well, it's a very feminine king of England in the bottom left-hand corner there.
So it's so funny how Google's trying to be like so socially woke here that it's disrupting their entire like factual results of some of this data, which is hilarious. We'll watch a little bit more.
Some might say a queen of England. And in medieval times, was the royal family that ethnically diverse? I'm not quite sure it was. Show me the illustration of a 1943 German soldier. Now, in 1943, the Germans were perhaps not the most diverse regime that one could possibly think of, but amazingly, these German soldiers are female, and again, there is one white man, but the rest aren't. And it almost seems like there's this program that whatever you ask for, you can't have more than one of the 4 options being white or male.
I wonder what the defense.
So there were some other issues too, like if you were asking, like, is this guy white? They wouldn't answer the question. And obviously this is just kind of, you know, just hilarious. But I mean, when you sign up to this stuff, the first thing they say is that this information isn't guaranteed in its accuracy. And obviously we're in the early stages of this. You think they would have went through a little bit more thorough testing before they kind of just launched this. But I honestly think these headlines are just getting a little bit ridiculous because they kind of obviously reverted back to their more traditional, just basic search prompt here, which there is a free version of it, which is beautiful, which we're going to play around with because I just want to show you the variance between this free version and ChatGPT. Now, I do have ChatGPT. We're utilizing it for workflow just because there's some other teams on that ChatGPT. I kind of just screenshotted the same prompts just to show you some comparables here because I just think people are severely underappreciating this. For instance, if we just take a look at like what are the 10 best dividend stocks to buy. Let's just see what happens if we just say that. Like, what are the 10 best dividend stocks to buy? Let's just give it a quick search here and see what it does. Give it a minute. All right, let's see. So I cannot recommend specific stocks for you to buy as I am not a financial advisor, which sounds like every YouTuber. How I can provide you with a list of 10 paying dividend stocks that are commonly mentioned on various websites, such as ExxonMobil, Pepsi, Johnson & Johnson, Walgreens. You got Archer Daniels, Chevron, a lot of oil companies, Procter & Gamble, Coca-Cola, Verizon, Altria Group. Last time I searched this, it actually gave me a much different result. It was actually at the top showing me a lot more REITs. It was giving me a lot of interesting, like higher yielding companies, but it seems to be slightly different every time I ask this question. But look, it's giving me like some stuff that I can actually do some research on. And it looks like, is this accurate? What is it saying here that, you know, currently it offers, so is this even accurate? Is ExxonMobil offering a 3.8% dividend yield? Let me just see. If I look up Exxon stock. Yeah, I mean, it's 3.66%. So it doesn't seem to be too far off on the dividend front. I wonder how backdated this information is. What's Pepsi at right now? So Pepsi, it's saying it's 2.8%. If I look up Pepsi stock, what's the dividend yield? Yeah, 2.98. So this data is like a lot more recent, right? Because incomparable, when I asked ChatGPT the same thing, the result that it gave me is that as an open AI language model, I can't provide real-time data or specific recommendations for the best performing dividend stocks, as it depends on the various factors, including market conditions and all this other stuff. So instead, it kind of just breaks down like what makes a good dividend company and kind of educates me, but it isn't really giving me a list. So in contrast, let's ask it something completely stupid, right? Like if I ask ChatGPT, you know, is the world flat? It says, no, the world's not flat. The concept of flat Earth was disproven centuries ago through scientific observations, kind of abbreviates a little bit farther. But if we go back here and we kind of just ask Gemini, let's just do this and see what the difference is the world flat? Let's see what it tells me here. And I just want to show you the difference in prompting and just kind of, you know, what this looks like. So here we go. So look, the world, or rather the Earth, is not flat. It is a sphere, slightly flattened at the poles and bulges at the equator. This shape is known as an oblate spheroid. There's overwhelming evidence supporting the Earth's sphericity. And then it gives you all these like really awesome like technical descriptions, which goes so beyond kind of the arrogant opening that we get from ChatGPT. It's like, this was disproven centuries ago, damn it. Like, so it's just kind of funny to see the technicalities that Google's offering here. So let's just kind of take a look at one more that I thought was kind of funny, like, you know, a little bit more technical. What's happening in the war with Russia and Ukraine? Obviously something a little bit more technical. If we ask this, it says, as of the last update, January 2022. So it will not give you much data beyond 2022 because ChatGPT is based, its whole language model is built off backdated data. So let's just ask, you know, Gemini the same question. What's happening in the, let me just make sure I prompt this the same. Sorry, what did I write in here? So what's happening in the war with Russia and Ukraine? So come back here. What's happening in the war with Russia and the Ukraine? Now let's just take a look here and see what it gives us. I mean, it's just the results are so much more technical and there's so much more like expertise. So here's the summary of the current situation in the war between Russia and Ukraine based off February 26, 2024. Like you see and this is the free version, mind you. And the version I'm showing you with ChatGPT is the paid version. So like there's just a stark night and day difference between these, right? And look at the in-depth. You get so much more in here, like international involvement, the humanitarian situation, the Eastern Front, Ukraine counter offensives. Like I'm just shocked. And again, I'd have to double check because you want to make sure this information is more accurate. Because again, it says President, Zelensky recently stated that 31,000 Ukrainian soldiers have been killed. Is that accurate? I'm gonna have to double check. I haven't updated myself, and you definitely want to cross-reference this information to understand if it's at least accurate. But I am still, is that accurate? I'm almost curious now. Let's just double check these stats because we got to get some accuracy here. Ukraine soldiers have been killed. How many? Let's just do one more. How many? Ukraine soldiers killed in this war. Because where's it pulling that data from? I'm curious. No, it says 31,000 Ukraine troops killed since the war started. So, I mean, like you said, you start getting an idea here of these vast differences, right? So what I want to talk about now is kind of the valuation behind Google and just why it continues to get crapped on so immensely. Because again, it is the cheap. And remember when I was saying that Meta was the cheapest S&P top 10? Now we're kind of in the inverse here, where Google's kind of just being unfairly treated for a company that has had consistent revenue growth even through this slowing period. And now again, it isn't performing at the growth rate of some of these other companies, obviously, but we are now back into the double digits, 13% revenue growth, and it's kind of getting back into the mid-teens. You're kind of returning to a more nominal. We'll see if we can get back to 20% where we were between the 2010s to about 2020. So let's see if we can get back up there, because then we're back into a full nominal market for a company at this scale is staggering and definitely is well deserved of a 25, 26 times multiple, right? But you take a look at the price to earnings, based off past here, right? Are we trading at around 24, 25? But you go back, right? And anytime Google has been trading down here has generally been a buying opportunity because it really hasn't traded down in the 19s and 20s. Basically, you'd have to go back before 2013. But by the time you get to 2014, this thing typically trades between 26 and 30. That's where it generally stays. But so we're kind of just in a little bit of a lower period, even though we're in a recovery phase, right? Incomparable to Microsoft, let's say, that trades at a 37 times, which is, just significantly higher. I think it's like 40% higher than where Google currently trades. And you're talking about a company that is back to getting into like 17%. So not that much higher, much more nominal for Microsoft. And again, you can compare the businesses and think, is Google dying? Is the end of search here? I mean, obviously there's perception is reality in these companies that you have to take into consideration, whereas Microsoft might be considered a more diversified revenue model for them, but still trading at a 17 times revenue growth here versus the current market cap, when you're talking about earnings where it's at 37 times, right? Which is historically the highest it's ever been. So you start looking at some of these mega giants and just how they compare in stride. And I think it's just entertaining to think about, right? Now let's talk about what I think Google has for it that just everybody is just underappreciating by just way too many leaps and bounds. Tesla, everyone seems to think is like the leader in self-driving, but they're just underselling the fact that Google is expanding its entire self-driving suite into a multitude of counties and states, right? So if you take a look at this ride-sharing program, they recently launched it in Phoenix, getting into Los Angeles. They're coming to Austin here very shortly. Los Angeles is just starting up. San Francisco has been there for a little while. And what I love most about this is when you kind of scroll down and you go all the way down here and you take a look and you look at the safety publication. And this is like, what Elon Musk has been touting forever. The data, basically the data-to-data indications, the Waymo drivers already reducing traffic injuries and fatalities in places where we currently operate. At Waymo, we aim to reduce traffic injuries and fatalities by driving safely and responsibly, and will carefully manage risk as we scale our operators, right? So they're already at the level of full self-driving capability. They are already building out this suite. It's a lot more technical and it's probably a lot more expensive than what Tesla's trying to do with just visual-based data. But the fact of the matter is unlike Tesla, this company is already operating. Now, the only competition that I think was really comparable was GM trying to play in this space. And as many of you know, this was part of, firstly, let's talk about the losses, but in this article, we're going to talk a little bit about, what's going on with Cruise. But basically, the company's other bets division, which is Waymo, one of the main expenses lost about $4.1 billion in 2023, according to the company's financial statement. Both Cruise and Waymo hit a major milestone this summer, basically when the California government basically the regulators allowed the companies to drive or offer 24/7 robotaxi services in San Francisco. However, a California Department of Motor Vehicles suspended cruise permits just a few months later after the October 2nd crash in which a human-driven car hit a jaywalking pedestrian and flung her in the path of a cruise driverless vehicle. Now, this is where the nefariousness comes into play, because in the footage initially shared by Cruise with the Washington Post and other media outlets, the California Department of Motor Vehicles, the robot car appeared to have stopped as soon as it made contact with the pedestrian. But it has been revealed by the state regulators and third-party reporters that basically dissecting the crash, that the car continued to drag the woman. It didn't stop after it was hit. And they're saying that basically a real driver would have realized that they were hit and they would have stopped to investigate further. And this has caused the entire halting of basically the Chevy Cruise, or their Cruise program, right? So, this is completely dropped GM out of the race right now. Like, they're probably not build. I don't even know if they're building data. We'll have to dig in and see what they're doing. But as far as I'm aware, they've halted most of their, what's going on with their full self-driving program. So let's take a look at Waymo itself. And I have done a lot of research on this, and I've watched a ton of videos comparing Waymo versus Tesla, kind of what's better about Teslas and what's better about Waymos. But we'll just kind of get a full view of this because, again, Waymo is the only company that currently exists in a full operation of self-driving.
So I'm currently in Los Angeles. Actually got invited out here by Waymo to come check out their driverless vehicles, which are now operating in the Los Angeles area. You may have heard of Waymo operating in San Francisco and Arizona. These are driverless vehicles that will take you from point A to point B without a driver. Nobody sitting in the driver's seat. The application is somewhat familiar if you've ever used any type of ride app. The difference here is there's no driver in the driver's seat. There's a variety of sensors and components that make this possible. But anyway, I'm going to go take a ride, take you along with me, and let's see what it's like to move around LA without a driver.
I'm about to lock in a destination here. It gives me an estimated drop-off time, and it also spots my existing location. So it's now telling me that the car will be there in 14 minutes. Car is less than a minute away now. There it is. The Waymo driverless car. Wow. What a crazy futuristic looking deal. Now, this is based on an iPace. We obviously have tons of cameras as well. Ready for pickup. And I've got a button that says unlock. The door handles extend, open up. Cool.
Good morning, Lewis.
Good morning, Lewis. So then we've got this display here. We've also got some USB ports back here. You can see the driver's seat is pushed all the way forward because, well, you don't need room for a human driver. The vehicle is nicely appointed as well. We've got leather seats. Well, obviously it's an iPace, kind of ambient sound playing, which lets you know you're about to ride into the future. So let's go ahead and start this ride.
Hello from Waymo. As we get going, just give us 1 minute to cover a few riding tips.
I mean, I've driven Teslas and obviously vehicles that have some version of self-driving, but to have no driver even in the car or near the steering wheel that can grab it in the event that it's necessary, that is a much different experience. So the interface is giving me some information here. It's showing me my drop-off in 9 minutes. I have a button that lets me pull over if I need to. I can also play music, which I won't do for the purpose of this video. And then there's a menu button as well. And the menu will let me choose between the map view, music, temperature. I can also learn more about the car, riding tips, and camera privacy. So the cameras are on, but the mics are off. The microphones will turn on when I'm connected to rider support. So otherwise, unless I need support, those microphones will be turned off. The graphic is somewhat confidence-inspiring because it's showcasing to you,
because you kind of get the
and regardless of what that looks like, having all this LiDAR exposed and so forth. But weirdly, having all those extra sensors and components actually gives you a little bit of extra confidence when you're riding the vehicle. Same with the voice that's talking to you, the pleasant tones, the variety of displays showcasing the visual of all the obstacles, and then just the driving itself. How smooth. The acceleration, the braking, and the decision making. I mean, I had that one example there where the light changed partway into the intersection. The vehicle noticed and then behaved a lot like a human, like an experienced human driver would.
See, this is what I think the variations between like Tesla that's trying to do fully video based, whereas with LiDAR and using all these other systems, you have redundancies, which I think matter a lot because it's like building a plane, right? Like you want redundancies in the way your plane flies. So if something fails, the whole thing's not going to fall out of the sky. And you need that in these early days of self-driving, I think, to just keep building this out. Whereas Tesla's trying to just get to this main point where they're like, if we could just make this work with this, like it scales instantly, right? Like Tesla has the fastest rate of scale if they can achieve it, which I think they're damn near close. I mean, their version 12 is absolutely staggering if you haven't watched the videos. But the fact is these two companies, Tesla and Google, are kind of just the forefront of this. And arguably, Google right now has the most capability because they have regulatory approval, whereas Tesla does not yet, right? So we'll just watch a little bit.
Cool. So I'm just sitting here
Just one more
eating my
this.
I actually think the thing that people are going to notice most.
I think I broke it. My internet's going to lag out now, streaming and watching videos at the same time. It's nice living in the city these days. Unlike when I lived out on the farm and I should have got Starlink, because my God, at least
when they get a
internet
chance to
works a lot better
experience
here.
this is the smoothness. I mean, no offense to any existing drivers. There are plenty out there that are very capable, but some are a little bit more abrupt on the acceleration and the braking. Whereas in the case of the Waymo vehicle here, you can take that very smooth curve and apply it to the entire fleet. You can find a satisfying rhythm and then roll it out to every vehicle in the streets. Hey, have you guys seen these cars with no driver, right? I think the wildest part for me is just how quickly you get used to the idea. At first, you're apprehensive. Like when you watch the car approach, you go, okay, no driver. But it doesn't take you very many miles traveled smoothly for you to embrace the Waymo driver and assume that it's going to make good decisions. It's wild how quickly that changes. And I suppose that's the case with any innovative technology is you quickly adopt it because of the convenience and because of the sophistication, and then eventually it becomes normal. The better the technology is, the more quickly it becomes normal and acceptable. Turn signal.
How awesome.
Car to the left. Car turns into the left lane. We go into the far lane. Nice gradual acceleration. Since it's selecting pick up and drop off point, selecting for spots within its mapping that it perceives as safe or good spots for these drop offs. So in this case, you're using tremendous amounts of information in order to determine where those drop off points are. And in many cases, it's only a minute walk from your destination anyways, so it's a worthwhile transaction. 2 and out.
I don't know.
Door handles in.
I'm always amazed by this.
And bye-bye Waymo. Cars get...
I saw this when I was in San Francisco, and I probably should have taken a ride just for the fun aspects of it. But maybe we'll go through some of your guys' Q&As real quick, and we'll finish up with a few more discussions. But and I'll give you some more of my prompt thinking on this. But I'd rather have those robot cars over most of the human drivers on the road, and I'd agree, right? I think I just think people think this is still so far out when Google's scaling like now. Like they've gotten to this point where they're building these data sets that are working for them, and I honestly wish they were more forefronted on the financials because they're losing billions of dollars doing this. But I'm curious to like how big of a business this has to get before it becomes profitable. Like what is the cost of all these tools on the car? Like prices are coming down significantly on LiDAR, because that was the thing with Tesla that I thought was funny, right? Because Elon's saying, oh, this stuff is so expensive, but every year the price of these tools like LiDAR sensors are dropping dramatically, right? So, I mean, you know, there's some interesting potential there. How do you think this will impact legacy auto and EV industry? So essentially what's going to happen here is that like the entire industry is going to have, like, honestly, I've stated this so many times before that like every industry, it becomes monopolistic because only so few companies are able to compete in the future, right? You look at iPhone, once you get a dominated brand and how fast that leaks you down to being the number one, then you have what, Samsung, and then maybe Huawei are at best. So, I mean, that's what happens to every industry right now. Like you're getting these shrinking and these monopoly companies that take over. And the same thing is going to happen to the auto industry. A lot of people keep arguing with me that, well, we're going to have all these auto companies, but honestly, so many, if you can't see the fact that almost all of them are going bankrupt, not all of the big giants, but all the small EV companies are going bankrupt right now. Like Rivian's burn rate is about to screw them. Lucid's on the path to being bankrupt in the next year. Like they need funding and they're not going to get it in this market. Like nobody wants to buy a vehicle company that isn't growing sales. And, you know, even Rivian's volume is dying up. Like it's terrible. Ford is getting wrecked in this with their EV. They're not making any money. Tesla, you know, there's only a handful of EV companies. If you believe EVs are the future, right? That's what you have to believe. But then you have to ask yourself, self-driving, like who owns that technology? Because if it is truly safer, then eventually it's going to be illegal for you to drive. And eventually you're going to have to adopt these systems and whoever owns these systems onto all cars at some point into the future. Now, obviously that's a long way out. But that's why I'm buying these companies like Tesla and Google and these companies that are forefronting this, because these are in and of themselves are trillion-dollar industries. Like whoever dominates self-driving, there might be 2 or 3 companies that own this because everybody else is failing miserably at it. They're going to crush because eventually everyone that owns a car is going to say, I want this system to some degree on my vehicle. And if Tesla and Waymo are the only companies that are offering it, whether, you know, Waymo allows you to subsidize it and buy it and have it adopted onto any car, or whether you like, I'm not sure how it's going to work, but those companies that have that capability are going to be worth an effing large amount of money. Like they're going to be adding trillions of dollars to their market caps. You know, it's going to be staggering. I don't think people are, you know, fully aware of the scope of this. Tesla and BYD for the win, potentially, you know, very likely. I hate arguing because people are so car fandom. Like I drive a used car, right? Like I don't even own a Tesla. I'm not buying an EV anytime soon. I could give 2 shits about a car. It's point A to point B. What's the most efficient and what's the cheapest? You know, I'm always going to buy a used car. So for as long as, you know, a used $10,000 car is cheaper than a used Tesla, I'm going to be buying a used gas car. Like, it's not like I'm a car guy. I'm just whatever's more efficient. And if you're buying a new car, we're on the cusp and pretty much there that it's way more efficient to be buying electric vehicles than it is to be buying gas cars. Argue it all you want. I'm not going to get into it. People lose their minds over this shit. GM till you die. Ford truckers out there, I salute you. You love your brands. I get it. Fine. I just have my opinions. I'm investing where I believe that future is going to be, and hopefully I'm not wrong, but we'll find out. Cars are a waste of money. I agree. I mean, the car that I bought is a 2016 Hyundai hatchback. I bought it for $7,800. It was like $8,500 said and done on the road. That's Canadian, by the way. So what is that, like $6,500 US? And I've been driving that car without any real maintenance or repair for, well, since basically 2019. Best car I ever bought. I mean, how do you get rich? You don't get rich by buying new cars. You just get a mechanic, man. I've never bought a lemon. I've never once bought a car from a dealership, and I've never bought a new car in my entire life. And I hate when people say, oh, it's not reliable. It's not this, it's not that. It's like, okay, well, you're talking to a guy that's never, ever bought in a new car and has never had an issue with reliability. So I think people like to bullshit themselves. Depreciating assets, I think they'll call it, yeah. We get bank earnings next week. I was just going to talk about that. I didn't want to do it in this video specifically, but yeah, we're getting a lot of Canadian bank earnings next week, which come down to loan loss provisions. That's going to be a fun discussion. I'll save for another video. That Mustang was your best car. Did you know that Mustang was your best car? Do you know I didn't have a Mustang. I had a Charger. I had two Chargers, actually, once upon a time. Chargers, I know, right? But the problem was that in my entertainment days when we used to like DJ and I was a full-time magician, I had to tow a trailer and I had to drive in the city a lot. And I killed my Grand Dam by towing with it. I actually burned it out. So I needed a car that could tow, but I could park underground in the city, and a truck was not feasible. And I couldn't really find a good mid-class that could tow. So a Charger I bought my first Charger for like $7,000 used as well. The second Charger I bought was like $10,000 used. And they were great cars, other than the front ends go out of them. They don't make it. After you hit like 200K, it's all downhill. It's too expensive. So after I got rid of those cars, I went back to super cheap hatchbacky cars, get a Subaru. Honestly, these foreign cars, man, these like Hondas and Hyundais, great cars. They're super cheap. They're super easy to fix, like beautiful little cheap drive around cars. I don't understand why people like BMW and Mercedes so much. They're actually not that reliable. They don't come up on like the highest reliability. You ask any mechanic about those cars and they laugh because the cost of repairs are so high and you have to go to a BMW dealership to fix anything. You can't even just replace the battery yourself. You actually have to go to buy a battery from the dealership and have them install it and reset the computer. It's so dumb. Google entry point. Google cheap right now, man. I wouldn't wait any longer. Again, I'm not offering this as financial advice. I'm just saying, like, I got my Google at what? Like, my average price on it right now is at about 140.88, sitting at around what, 143, 144. Honestly, if it drops into the 130s, I'll be buying more for sure. It's the same thing I said about Tesla. Like, I bought Tesla. My average buy on it right now is what, 186. I'm going to wait for Tesla to hopefully drop below that before I buy more, but I'm always a little skeptical that it's not going to happen because you never know, right? And in my opinion, I think these are good prices today. Like, I'm happy scaling them at this price. So I'm just going to keep cost averaging, but not be too aggressive. So if they do drop, I can buy a lot more. Because like I said, I could easily see growing Google to about a 20 or 30K position and Tesla probably about the same over the next, 12 months. We'll see. Obviously, it's dependent on what the market does. Because if they shoot up, like if Tesla ran up to 250 or something stupid, I'm not buying it. All jokes aside, I daily Golf R and got it at a great price. I keep it forever. German cars are awesome to drive. Also money pits. Yeah. I'm 53 and I've never bought a brand new car. And, I'm a self-made millionaire, Honda Accent Accord. I applaud you, sir. I think the car, I hate arguing with people about this. I was just talking to a guy about this today. It's like when you're young, a $5 Starbucks is not $5. If you're 20 years old, that Starbucks coffee is costing you anywhere from $40 to $80 over that 40-year period you would have had to compound that $5. And it's the same thing with a car, right? Like when you're buying $30,000, even if it's a new car at 30 grand and you're 20 years old, you're an idiot. You're an idiot. Like that 30 grand. I mean, I always just love playing around with the compound calculators. I can pull that up quick and just joke about it. Compound. Like, let's just say let's say you do what I did, or you do what this gentleman did that's now a millionaire. I mean, I think the car is like the end all be all factor to becoming a millionaire. I mean, you just take a look at this, right? Like, let's just say instead of buying a $40,000 new car, you bought a $10,000 used car, which will last a long time. Don't get me wrong. Maybe not as long as a new car, but it's going to last you. I mean, every car I've owned, I've driven for quite a period of time. But let's just say you save yourself 30 grand and you buy a $10,000 vehicle, right? So let's just say you buy you're 20 years old. You go buy a $10,000 car. Somehow you have an extra 30 grand sitting around, which I know you don't because you're financing it, because no one's got 40 grand to buy a new car because you're all broke when you're 20. But let's just, as you know, just as a way of measuring this, let's say you get an average of a shitty 8% return because you're not invested in the S&P 500. And let's say, I messed that up. I got to put that in the percentage. In the years to grow it, let's say you just 30 grand is all you got. You're investing it until you're 60, that gives you 40 damn years. That's going to turn into $651,000. So a $40,000 car at 20 years old, you just gave up an entire, most people don't retire on that amount of money, by the way. Most people don't have 651 grand in retirement. So that just like puts into perspective how much money you're giving away when you're buying a car. It's absolutely ridiculous. Like that car cost you more than a Lambo. For $30,000 car or $40,000 car at 20 years old, it's costing you more than a Lambo. You know what insane that is? It's costing you like 3 Lambos. So, I mean, it's always good to keep that in perspective. And I'm not saying like give up luxuries in life, but a car is just so dumb. It is the dumbest thing people buy because of their egos. And I just laugh so hard because everyone thinks they need to go to a dealership and get ripped. Trust me, the dealer. I laugh when people come out of the dealership and they're like, I got a deal. I haggled that. I negotiated that and haggled them down. It's like, okay, good luck. I'm sure you did. What is the best ETF to use in a corporate account for growth and reduce taxes? Well, I think if you're buying Canadian stocks, first and foremost, I don't even think you pay taxes on Canadian dividends, because I think Canadian dividends paid to another Canadian corporation is like waived of tax. I'd have to double check, talk to an accountant. I'm not a financial advisor, but I'm pretty sure that's how it works. But if you're like me and you just want growth and you don't want to touch it, you don't want to manage it, you just want to leave it there like I'm doing, just buy like an S&P 500, you get a little bit of dividends. Yeah, they're going to get taxed. You're going to lose some money, but you're there for growth. Buy the QQQ ETF. I think there's another one that Fidelity just came out with that's pretty interesting. Just buy growth ETFs. That's all you got to do. Buy Google stock. I mean, buy just anything that doesn't pay dividends, sit on it, forget about it for 10 or 20 years. And then when you want to pay yourself out like an RSP, just take gains as you need to pay yourself out when you're in a lower income tax bracket. At 8%, I know that's 8%. I mean, imagine making the market returns over the last decade, how fast that would have bumped you. The average price of a new car in Canada is nearly $67,000. I think you'd be crazy if you're spending 60 grand on a car. Literally every car I've owned, I think 7 or 8 cars since I've been 16. And if you added up all the money I spent on those cars, probably including gas and insurance, I haven't spent 67 grand. I have a hard time believing I've spent that much on vehicles over the last 10 years. With tech at all-time highs, when do you think we see CAD banks at all-time highs? Like I said, don't buy CAD banks for growth. Don't get that kind of misconstrued. Canadian banks aren't growth beasts. They offer like decent rates of return, but nothing like US tech companies. And again, US tech companies are expensive, but if you believe, like I believe, that we're not done this technological jump and trillion-dollar industries are about to be made, then I would still focus on the S&P 500. Like, people give up and they're like, oh, it's so expensive. Get like everything money. We're 90% overvalued. It's like we've been overvalued since 2008. Shut up. Like, it's always going to be overvalued. We're in a new market. We're in a new margin expansion. Yeah, it takes time. The market might correct by 10 or 20%. You just buy more. If you really believe the market's overvalued, I think you're missing the mark here. I think people are dumb. I honestly think most people that follow just pure financials are idiots. I think if you've ever run a business in your life, like it's just, oh God, I can't get over people that just run fundamental analysis and think that's the end all be all. You'll notice I kind of show you like the full wavering story of Google, right? Like you look at Waymo, you look at Gemini, you compare the businesses, even though these are money losing businesses today, they're going to be huge, substantial margin expanding businesses sometime in the next decade. It's going to take 10, 15 years, so be it. But they are going to be massive, likely trillion-dollar businesses. At least somebody's going to be, right? So it's like you can't just look at these companies today and say they're expensive when you know what they're working on is worth substantially more. It's like buying a gold miner. Like say this gold miner tests under the ground and this gold miner is like, hey, like we're going to go drill and we believe that there's a shit ton of gold here based off geophysics and some of the stuff we did with some helicopters and satellites. And it's just like, okay, buddy, like whatever. And then he goes and drills and finds like $1 trillion worth of gold like India did. Like, okay, now we got $1 trillion asset all of a sudden. But yesterday we had no value. Today we have $1 trillion asset. Let's see what it's going to cost to get that asset and what the margins are going to be. Like, I mean, people just think businesses are fundamentals. They're not. Gold exploration companies, they have no fundamentals. Biotech companies have no fundamentals. Like a company curing cancer right now is not really a cancer curing company, are they? They don't make revenue off curing cancer. That's how everything money thinks. They're like, Tesla's just a car company. All their R&D and all this other stuff they're working on, it has no value. You know, those none of it has value. The only thing they make money on is cars. It's like, okay, buddy, then invest like it's a car company and we'll see how it works out in the next 10 years for you. You know, these kind of people that's why they short Nvidia stock. Like, that's why they're so dumb and short these kind of companies. The problem is you don't know what happens tomorrow, and you can only presume that there's value in the business. This is why when you buy bank stocks and traditional companies, that's everything money. Like, if you want income and you want security and you don't care about growth, you're going to be looking at like Canadian stocks, right? You look at Canadian banks, you look at companies like Enbridge and Bell. I mean, those are great companies that can produce really good returns, but they're not going to be giving you 10x like returns. It's not. Even at the scale of Google, you're going to get a way higher average rate of return from a company like that with the margins they have and the business moats they have than you're going to see from a Canadian bank stock that's been around for 150 years. They haven't innovated in the last 100 years. Nothing's really changed. They're just trying to get you to do more online banking, and that's about it. Remove some brick and mortar stores, expand some margin, but the banking sector doesn't really evolve that much, right? So you just got to be a little bit more cognizant that businesses aren't just fundamentals, and just because it pays a high yield and it's been around for a long time doesn't mean it's just going to give you some great rate of return. I mean, look at Bell. Bell, the only yield you've gotten over the last several years has been from the dividend. You haven't got any growth out of the stock, right? Yeah, but again, I'm not shitting on these companies. Like, by all means, I think if I was in retirement, like, my portfolio would not be made up the way it is now, right? I mean, if you look at like my parents and how they would invest, like, you want more fixed income assets. Like, you want high interest savings ETFs. You want at least 10 or 20% of your portfolio in bonds and GICs and lock in high yields, because you can't rely on a market crash when you're retired. Like, you need stable income. You need companies that even if the stock price drops, you're going to be able to pay your bills. Like, when I'm buying Tesla stock and that thing drops 50% tomorrow, like, I'm screwed if I need that money. But I'm 31 years old. You know, I don't need that money right now. I can wait 10 or 20 years. So it's like, I don't mind taking the risk. But if you need that money, you're going to be like everything money. You're going to be like these YouTube channels that only care about fundamentals. And you should if you're retiring. But if you're young, honestly, you can't look at a company that has a 40, 50, even like Nvidia at 60, 80 times multiple, like, and say, oh, it's just too expensive. People were saying it was expensive when it dropped and people were shorting it. It's like, and now it's gone up like 300% since people started shorting it. So you got to just understand that the market's purely fugazi. Fundamentals mean nothing. And you could create a business tomorrow that's generating thousands of dollars, millions of dollars in revenue and be worth billions of dollars overnight. Because that's what ChatGPT was. It just came out of nowhere. It's something that people were working on for several years. They didn't even know it was happening. And then out of nowhere, Microsoft is like, we're buying this. Everybody needs NVIDIA chips. I mean, this is the funny thing, right? Like, look at NVIDIA's revenue, right? I love looking at it because I think it's like the prime example of just like how fast businesses can change overnight. I mean, it's so, you'll never see a business like this, right? Like, this is so rare. I mean, look at this. So everybody's like, Nvidia's dead. We're coming out of the boom of crypto. People aren't buying graphics cards to do crypto mining. And if you go back, listen to the conference calls of the CEO of Nvidia, and he's like, oh, we're all about crypto mining. Crypto's the future, man. He didn't state anything about crypto once in the last earnings call. He didn't effing say a thing. And that was the future, man, when the revenue was blowing up. Then the company started to deteriorate. All of a sudden, their revenues were going negative, and everyone's like, this is the end of Nvidia. And then boom, all of a sudden, ChatGPT comes around, AI, large language models. We need H100s. We need $40,000 chips. And before you know it, the company's generating tens of billions of dollars from Meta and Tesla and Amazon. And they're all buying these chips up like they're candy. Revenue's up 200% in a quarter. We're losing our minds. Like, it's so funny, man, how fast that happens, right? So again, like, just be cognizant of that. Don't throw all your money in one stock. You know, be careful. I love Canadian stocks, but I bought some more TELUS last time. But I'll be buying some Canadian stocks, and I think I might try and pick up some of the Canadian banks before earnings come around. But we have good exposure. Oh, I got one more. I just want to answer one more comment because I love this guy. It's becoming like an inside joke that my wife's a better investor than I am, which we just kind of started maxing out her tax advantage accounts. I love Vic, but he's like, China taking a hit. Should I invest? I'm respectively asking your missus and not Kyle. Yeah, I think Meta right now is our largest single stock position just because it never stops going up. And she's been the one gracing our portfolios with that, really, really, taking it easy and not selling anything like I have over the years. But China's also really interesting talking about tech companies, right? And I just really want to state this very carefully because China has a real potential to have a comeback, but the problem is perception is reality, right? And I think this is a good way to round this conversation off and finish up with like where discounts happen when there's a disconnect between reality and the market expectations. So like when you talk about perception is reality, here you have a company like Alibaba that's trading at a 14 times multiple. Alibaba, I think, does like 3 times the volume shipment of even Amazon. Like they don't make the same revenue, but they are shipping way more volume. They are a way bigger business by footprint than Amazon is in the same industry, right? When it comes to e-commerce, I don't know about cloud, but when it comes to e-commerce, but then again, they have social media apps. They're very diversified business, right? So what I think is so funny about this is that like, unless the perception around China changes, these stocks will always remain in the dump because again, fundamentals do not matter as much as perception does. So you take a look at something like GEO Group, right? Like this is another one of like the Michael Burry favorites. This was a stock that I used to hold. I ended up on a Netflix special because I own this stock. And yeah, I mean, we're getting a little bit of a recovery here and it's great. But I mean, like you're talking about from the bottoms to the tops, you're up. Okay, so I guess you could have got a doubling if you bought the lows. Actually, that's not too bad. You know, this is actually pretty good. But the fact of the matter is that this company is down still 64%. There's a long way to go for recovery. And I really have a hard time believing this company is going to recover just as much as I believe MO is going to have a real hard time recovering because, you know, these companies, the perceptions of them are just, you know, they're just not well perceived companies. And I think these Chinese companies are the best example, right? Like, I mean, these companies should be trading at easily 30% higher at the minimum. I mean, you know, Alibaba should, I mean, they're lower than where they were at their IPO price. It's effing insane for how much revenue growth and how much this company's expanded since it IPO'd, being one of the largest Chinese companies and one of the largest companies globally. But the fact of the matter is you could buy this thinking you're getting a discount today. But I mean, if you bought this stock back in 2014, like you have made zero return. This company doesn't pay a dividend until now. It's paying a dividend, but I mean, it's down 19%. You would have lost 20% over a 10-year period just because perception has destroyed this company. And it was cheap when it IPO'd. Like it was a good company to buy when it IPO'd and you thought you were on top of the world. But if you didn't take profit, you've been screwed, right? So when it comes to perception, what I like is companies that I know have really good branding and moat power, and they have the ability to change that perception over time. So when I think there's a disconnect, like I think that's going on with Tesla right now, I think there's a lot of misconceptions about electric vehicles. I see so much crap on media. When you look at Google, they're getting crapped on left, right, and center. And it is well deserved. I mean, some of this stuff does deserve a highlight. However, the problem is people keep thinking that Microsoft and all these other companies have better AI software than Google does. And I think they're wrong. I think Google's on the forefront of some of the best AI tools that currently exist on the market. But nobody's saying that. Nobody. Everyone's just caught up on ChatGPT and what, you know, Sam Altman's doing and like this talk of building a $7 trillion computer. It's just like that's taking the whole heap out of Google's oomph because Google should be trading at a 30 times multiple easily. So, I mean, it's just something to take into consideration. Is TSC, I own this stock. I wish I held it still, but it is a good company, but unless China invades. If China ever invades and, you know, let's say Russia takes Ukraine and, you know, China starts, because China keeps saying that they're going to take Taiwan. That's the only thing that scares the crap out of me, because if that ever happens, if there's even a hint of it happening, TSM is going to get like obliterated. Their stock will drop 30% the next day. I guarantee it. I'm going to get Gemini to generate pictures of Kyle. I bet he becomes a minority probably to avoid the whole Taiwan thing. Yeah, you got to be a little careful. If you do want to play the chip sector, I think SMH is great. It's just highly concentrated into Nvidia. Honestly, I wish I bought SMH earlier. I owned some of the chip stocks really early, and I was an idiot for selling them. I was really flip-floppy when I was a little bit more concerned about the market environment when they started raising interest rates, because everybody's revenue was falling off a cliff, and I really wasn't sure who was going to survive. I took the more the more pessimistic way out by putting that money into the S&P. Yeah, I made great returns, but my wife is making much better returns riding the volatility that I didn't have the balls to ride. But you do have to keep in mind, right? Like we're now back into a more nominalized market environment. We know what companies are dying. We know market spend is here. We know Google's like Meta, they're doing fine. I'm a little bit more comfortable investing in these stocks, but I'm not comfortable now investing in the chip sector because I don't know how it's going to change over the next 5 years. I don't know how long companies continue to build cloud computing sectors out. I don't know if you know, you hear the CEO saying, oh, we have like 2 years of demand, but that doesn't mean they have actually 2 years of demand. I mean, again, you look at crypto mining, that was the biggest thing and they were printing off of it. And then out of nowhere, it changed. And that could very likely happen if somebody makes a better chip. If something like any, I just don't understand the industry and I'm ignorant to it. So I'd rather own the S&P 500 because I own the same chip companies. I even own chip companies by owning, SCHD, for example, or some of these dividend ETFs like Broadcom or whatever. So, I mean, just be cautious and be careful because that industry is very volatile. High rates of return, though. Volatility equals, higher rates of return if you're willing to kind of stomach it and ride it out. But I would honestly just buy an ETF that concentrates the sector because it's a very sketchy sector all around right now. If you ever feel bad, just remember someone sold AMD at $2 a share not too long ago. Yeah, I mean, Kathy Wood sold out of Nvidia at the bottom. She basically sold the bottom of Nvidia, right? It hits hard. It's scary. That's why you got to hold long. Like if you find good companies, like honestly, I'll finish up with this. But if you want to see the best investor of all time, and I can't state this enough, go look at the Canadian pension plan. If I could just put all my money into the Canadian pension plan and let them manage like my TFSA, but be able to pull it out whenever I want, I would probably just do that. I honestly think their management is tenfold anybody I've ever met in my life. They bought Nvidia at a great time. They own the 407, 50% of it. They bought Google. They bought like all these tech companies years ago, and they're still holding them. They got diamond hands, and their team of investors, just my jaw hits the floor when I review their portfolio. They have the best real estate portfolio I've ever seen in my life. Everyone bitches about Canadian pension, they don't know what they're doing. I'm like, you're an idiot. They're like the most supreme investors on the freaking planet. The people that manage our retirements for government pensions. It's crazy. It's crazy. I've heard about the China-Taiwan conflict. Yeah, be super careful. Sold Nvidia in 2021. But look at me. I sold Meta at 220. I mean, I sold Apple and Microsoft. I sold all my tech companies to put it in the S&P. And that's not dumb per se. I did well in the S&P, but hell, you look at where Microsoft is today, and I was obviously better off. Here's what I've come to realize, folks. Put most of your money in the S&P, make 5 or 10 concentrated bets into stocks you love, and just never sell them. Hold on to them for 10 or 20 years. Never sell them because good companies will go a long way. And I'm not talking about penny stocks. Penny stocks, you swing trade. Really fundamental companies you want to hold long term. I mean, you look at something like a Clean Technologies. I could hold on to that for the next 5 years, but I'm going to swing trade it. I'm not going to be holding that into perpetuity, right? Meta and these kind of fundamental massive market cap companies that are competing for trillion-dollar industries that have the money, the scale, the capacity to do so. I want to hold those for 10 or 20 years. That's where I'm trying to get my mindset back to. I don't care about the volatility. I don't care if it drops 50%. I'm just going to try and pick a few, put most of my money in the S&P, and we'll see what happens. I'm going to do it very particularly, though. I'm going to do it very slowly, and I'm going to scale 1 or 2 companies at a time. I'm not looking to buy 10 or 20 stocks all at once. I just really want to pick 1 or 2 that I like right now, which is Tesla and Google, and we'll just slowly, very, cautiously and just very, you just want to finesse it. You don't want to rush into it and just, you don't have to focus on 10 different companies. You don't need 10 different ETFs. You just need a few good handful of companies, a good few ETFs. You're done. You're done. What about Avila? Yeah, Avila Energy is cool. I've got a few small caps. These are like sponsored companies that I work with. And again, these are the agent that I work with, dude, the guy that this dude is like the Batman of like the small cap realm of things. This dude has hit so many home runs, and he really only works with like 2 or 3 companies. And every now and again, he's like, hey, if you don't mind talking about these companies, and I wish he would just do podcasts, because if you could listen to him talk about like what he knows about these companies, from the management to the dilution to all this stuff, it's very fascinating. But Avila is really interesting, I think, as a small cap play. I'm very curious to see how it pans out this year. But yeah, same with like Aduro is fascinating. I sold Visa at 216 last year. That's one that I should have kept. Yeah, it just depends on where you're at. I'm going to stop being stupid, though. So fingers crossed we're making ourselves better investors and, everything goes well. But I feel like I'm in a more stable mindset because at least I have stable living environment. I've got, we were just joking about this. We were at Whole Foods, Longo's. You know how expensive that food is, too? I mean, holy crap. We were talking about cheap shopping. I was joking with my mother. Me and my wife, we go out, we can pick up like $60 to $80 worth of food at Walmart or No Frills or whatever, and that lasts us the whole week. I just went to Longo's and I was like, holy crap. I'm like, I could spend $60 on one item there that I could eat for just dinner. Like, Jesus, steaks there, fish. Oh my God, it's so expensive, man. People got expensive taste. But like that dude with his car, man, it's all about that. You just want to be cheap. I'll enjoy my crab legs and stuff in the next 5 or 10 years when our mortgage is paid off. You know, we're semi-retired. The wife can quit working. I can work part-time. That's when we're going to celebrate, boys. That's what we're all working toward here. But stay cool. Stay awesome, folks. I got to quit rambling. I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.